Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Wannabe LetterBoxd with me, your host, Fabiana Rosario. And in this week's episode, to kick off our next Best Picture nominee, I watched One Battle After Another, which is directed by the one, the only Paul Thomas Anderson, famously known for, drumroll please, for Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, The Master, Licorice Pizza, Phantom Thread, and I can go on and on and on. So, this film is very dense. It's very long. It's almost 3 hours in runtime. It is definitely politically charged, and it's a little bit uncomfortable with also a smidge of comedy and humor in it. It doesn't necessarily take itself too seriously to sort of soften the messaging lying underneath. And so this episode, I really want to focus on three things. I want to focus on the performances. So particularly my favorite is Chase Infinity's the breakout star of this film. The dystopian setting of the narrative and what it necessarily says about our power and political commentary that it has to say. And finally, whether this movie actually has a shot with this upcoming Oscar season. So let's just get into it. So to kick off my film review, I want to first say that I gave this film 3.5 stars, I believe, on LetterBoxd. So that will be our pretense for what we're about to talk about today. So the first thing I want to talk about is the performances. So I do feel like this performance is very heavy lifted by its performances for sure. This film is heavy lifted by its performances. And Chase Infinity is definitely the emotional anchor for this film. She is so, I feel like, restrained. It's very calm. It's not super over theatrical, no over screaming or crying or anything. It is just so real and natural, and she plays a character who, has been running her whole life essentially. She's 16 years old and barely has to sneak around and having a cell phone. She's hiding from all these things that her father's telling her about, and she learns how to survive is through being quiet and through restraining herself and not being overly loud and overly emotional and XYZ. So there are scenes through this film where she says very little, but the camera chooses to stay on her long enough where you can see exactly how her character is reacting or wishes to react in that moment. So it's very, very typical of Paul Thomas Anderson to trust, I feel like, the silence of a film. So Infinity meets no different, but she meets this challenge with true precision and true success. She is, to me, the standout of the film. She is incredible and, in my opinion, deserving of an Oscar nomination that she unfortunately did not receive, but she has been getting accolades for the rest of the season, so I'll take what I can get. But yeah, and the supporting cast also in this film is great. Leonardo DiCaprio is great as per usual, no surprise there. Benicio del Toro is awesome in his part as well. Sean Penn is great and comically funny, and our queen, and amazing performance from Tiana Taylor. She does a great job playing Perfidia Beverly Hills, a very, very outspoken and big face of the revolution in the beginning of the film. So she definitely makes her mark on the screen whenever she's on there. Now moving on to the dystopian setting of One Battle After Another. So I feel like the setting in this movie is purposefully kind of vague. It's not really, we don't get backstory as to how we got here. And I feel like it's really important to recognize that. It's really close to a near present nightmare, as I like to call it. It's definitely showcasing that the systems that we already have in this country have just been kind of oomphed up a few notches, especially what's been going on recently with the ICE raids, things like that. It's definitely resonated with me a lot watching the film. And what I think the film does really well, or what I think is just interesting to note, is the treatment of Black women within the world. So it doesn't necessarily make their suffering look any different than anyone else's, however, but it doesn't shy away from the things that they've suffered from. And it's interesting because they play a part where they're very hypersexualized, hypervisualized, very, big parts by like these men in the military and things like that. However, they also play the flip side of being ignored and being the undercurrents of the big revolutions. And so it's really interesting to look at that. And tying back to Chase Infinity's character, she exists in a system that, demands this sort of determination from her, while she's offered like no protection in return, because obviously her mother was kind of scorned her way with the revolution, and so she doesn't have as many resources or as many people willing to help her as the normal woman would, or the other woman would. So I think it's just very interesting. So Paul Thomas Anderson obviously doesn't give the audience straight commentary here in the film. He definitely just lets the patterns that are showcased throughout the film make the statement for himself. So I feel like it's a very interesting thing to note and something that definitely stuck with me for sure. Now, as for the film's Oscar chances, I would say yes, this film has obviously gained a lot of academic accolades in the nominations. Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm pretty sure, snagged one. The film snagged plenty with Best Picture nominee, of course, and Tiana Taylor, I believe, also snagged an Oscar nomination. So it's definitely been a talked about movie this film season. However, it's not necessarily a crowd pleaser. There's been a lot of mixed reviews in the film. Friends that I've talked to that I said that I was watching this movie this week, they were like, it's really good. And I also heard people being like, I haven't really heard much about it. Or, ooh, I heard that didn't get that many, like, wasn't all green, you know, in regards to its reviews. So it's definitely a film that's stirred up a lot of conversation, which I feel like is definitely warranted. I only gave the film 3.5 stars. Of course, I enjoyed the performances and was entertained. However, it wasn't my personal favorite of this season compared to last week's episode, as in Sinners. We all know I'm biased. But yeah, so Chase Infinity, unfortunately, was robbed, in my opinion, for Best Actress nominee. But Tiana Taylor deserved, and Leonardo DiCaprio, of course, deserved. And so yeah, I do believe the film does have a good chance at winning the Best Picture award. It's been able to snag a few from the Golden Globes, and I believe SAG is coming up, and they also got the nomination from the BAFTAs, so it's looking pretty good for one battle after another. So it's a real question at this point with the Academy if it's going to embrace the political commentary of this film, especially with the current climate that we're in today. But truly, one battle after another is a very interesting film that, you know, can land at exactly the right moment. So we'll see. And that's it for this episode. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and enjoy listening.